Hello, and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome progressive from the great state of Colorado, Iman Jodeh. How you doing, Iman?
I'm good. How are you? How's everyone out there?
Doing well. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me. You're running a seat that a Democrat incumbent is term limiting out on. You do have a Republican challenger. I didn't do a whole lot of research. It's somewhat of a safe blue district, but obviously you're taking the race very seriously. Iman could use our donations, our volunteer efforts, our support. I'll pull up her website here in a few in her district. It's imanforcolorado.com. I want to talk to you a little bit about your history, your platform, why
Yeah.
you're awesome. I think you're a superstar.
Thank
Not to get too ahead of it, but I was like, I can't wait for her to run for federal office. But we'll
you.
talk about that later. So, right. Let me just ask about this seat before we get into your activism stuff. What motivated you to run specifically for this seat, HD 41 in Colorado?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on today. It means a lot that we're raising up progressive candidates. I am a first generation American and a first generation Coloradan. And I've actually lived in House District 41 in Aurora, Colorado my entire life. And so this is my home. I love the multifaceted tapestry that makes up my community. We're one of the most diverse probably in the United States. And so I love going up and down one of our main corridors here, Havana, and knowing I could literally go around the world on a culinary tour while supporting small businesses. And again, being the daughter of immigrants and refugees, I think it speaks to my campaign slogan, which is making the American dream a reality for everyone.
Nice. What does that mean exactly, that slogan? Can you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. My parents came here almost 50 years ago in search of that American dream. And they came here as Palestinian refugees and immigrants. And they were able to realize their own American dream through hard work and determination and give their children what they were never able to have. And so they became small business owners and educators. And that was really the foundation for my own value system. And so, I'm the product of public schools. I am the wife of a former nurse and combat interpreter. And, I am an educator and a community advocate. I work in nonprofits. And so I think a lot of times when we think of the American dream, while I am in fact a product of that, today it is becoming harder and harder to realize. We have the rising costs of living, unattainable quality healthcare, our climate crisis. We have the need for criminal justice reform. We have children in cages in our own backyards. And we are fighting for basic human and civil rights on the front of Me Too movements and the Black Lives Matter movement. So this is, to me, once we tackle these issues, we can realize our American dream together.
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned a little bit. You have a history of civil rights activism, justice, social work. Meet the Middle East was a program I think you started. Interfaith Alliance, you're a member of. Colorado Women's Lobby. How have all those sort of, the intersectionality of how have all those fed into what you hope to bring to, the Colorado House seat?
Yeah, and thank you for raising those organizations up. I'm very blessed to be involved in, the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado, the Women's Lobby of Colorado. I sit on the board of Ready to Work Aurora and the Village Exchange Center here, also in Aurora. And I think, through my lived experiences, right, whether it's, being a Palestinian Muslim American, experiencing oppression and my own civil rights violated, it gives me the ability to have a different lens when it comes to social justice and speaking truth to justice as well. So when I testify at the Capitol on various bills, whether it is equal pay for equal work, or speaking against banning 22-week abortions in Colorado, or fighting for basic civil rights here in Colorado. I come to it with that perspective that I think is sometimes underrepresented in Colorado. And so being the first Muslim and Arab woman to be elected to the Colorado State Legislature will also bring that diversity to the Capitol.
Amazing. That'll be historic. I look forward to that day.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
she needs your vote on November 3rd if you're in Colorado's 41st. Let me pull up the district since we're here.
Yeah.
Actually, let me pull up your website first. Iman could use your donations. Donate right here. Volunteer
Please.
right here. Any amount helps, right? So $10,
Yes.
$20, $27, $100, whatever you can do.
Yes.
But one
Thank
thing,
you.
before I pull up the district, one thing about your website that is really incredible, the issues are here, your events, a long list of endorsements, including Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, Barack Obama, Biden, Harris. The current incumbent has endorsed you, which is incredible, Jason Crow. Check out all of her endorsements there. But the one thing I really appreciate about your website is your legislative experience. So you actually delineate by name all the House and state bills that that you've either contributed to, worked on, or influenced, or have an opinion on. It's all laid out here, and it is comprehensive. I could scroll all day long. So you have,
Thank you.
here's your professional experience. So this is, you are a serious business, and it's all laid out here. So here you are at the UN. I hope anyone watching this will go check out imanforcongress.com. Obviously, make a donation. But look at proven record. This is who you want advocating for the people in Colorado, someone who's done the work. But what I wanted to show is District 41. So I like to give candidates an opportunity to brag on your district. You said born and raised in Aurora. What do you love about it?
I love everything about Aurora. I think it really is a reflection of who I am. Again, having grown up here, I went to Ponderosa Elementary School, to Prairie Middle School, and to Overland High School. And I continued that public education through graduate and undergraduate at CU Denver. Aurora is really a cornucopia of what makes up America in my mind. We have a high concentration of people of color, of immigrants, refugees, of older folks. We have a myriad of small businesses. We have the largest mosque in the Rocky Mountain region right here in HD 41, which my father co-founded about 35 years ago. And so having roots in this community is really important to me. And again, I think, when I think about my district, when I think about the people of my district, I have a sense of kinship and relationship with them that allows me to be a better advocate on their behalf. And again, having those sustained relationships and that ability to say, you know what, as a person of color, as a minority, as a marginalized group of people, I will stand for your rights. But at the same time, I'm also going to fight for rights that affect all of us, like the climate crisis, like the cost of living, like access to healthcare. And again, all of these policy areas that affect not only HD 41, but really all people of Colorado is what's going to make me a good legislator.
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, that comes to mind because of your historic positioning, hopefully when you make it into the House, but your platform delineates, what you would do for working families. You mentioned climate change, and, we could hit on a few of those things, but, I'd be remiss. I mean, I'm not alone in this, that every time I hear Aurora, I think of, the tragedies, right? So, let's start with common sense gun reform. I'm sure that's a hot topic in your district.
Yeah, we in Aurora, and when I say Aurora is the third largest city in Colorado. So, this isn't exclusive to HD 41 in Aurora, but gun violence prevention is a big deal here. And, I am endorsed by Moms Against Gun Violence, and it's important to me that we really have a true reflection of what it means to serve and protect. And so, reevaluating that with our police force is important. Unfortunately, Aurora has experienced, the Aurora movie theater shooting. We've experienced, unjust police killings here in Aurora. And it breaks my heart that the people of Aurora have to continue to experience this because there is no common sense gun reform. And so if we can move towards gun violence prevention and really start to talk about how we respect our national constitution, right? But continue to protect those most vulnerable. And in my mind, that's often our children, right? Those are the people that are on the receiving end based on the color of their skin or their immigration status. Those are the people, to me, that we need to protect the most. Our schools should not be a place that parents have to fear or second guess when they send their children to school. Schools should be a safe haven. And so, again, how do we start to reshape the conversation and reshape the culture around gun safety and gun violence prevention is going to be a big priority.
Yeah, well said. And one of the real amazing things about Moms Demand Action is that they work on state legislatures, state legislative level issues all around the country. If you're doing things right, you'll have an army of red shirts behind you in the state capitol. I don't know what the status is in Colorado, in terms of red flag laws and things like that. I know, I always like to bring up the Charleston loophole because that doesn't get talked about enough. We need to close that. But yeah, Godspeed on that front.
For sure.
Yeah. Speaking of, the one thing that the Trump era, and it's not necessarily specific to the Trump era, but it's certainly been heightened, is obviously the vitriol and Islamophobia and xenophobia and so forth, right? And we couldn't have better examples with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. The hate that gets hurled at them, and the grace that they show under that pressure, is miraculous. I wish I could be that type of human, right? Especially Ilhan Omar. Can you talk about, not if maybe you've seen any of that firsthand, or if they're inspirational to you in that regard, and because you'll be breaking new ground, and that vitriol isn't going to go away. We're going to have to contend with that, win, lose, or draw on the presidential election. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel really blessed to live in Colorado. We don't have as we see in other states, the higher rate of Islamophobia. That said, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist here. It does, unfortunately. And I have seen that manifest itself, in my campaign with people who fear progressive candidates. And let's face it, I do embody what many people fear. I am the other, right? I am what not only this administration, but the past 2 decades has really crafted as what we need to fear here in the West. I am a practicing Muslim. I am a woman of color. I am Western born, Western educated. I am a Palestinian American. My brother is in the military. Again, I'm married to a former combat interpreter. And so, it's not lost upon me that my identity is what people fear. And I think through my platform over the past almost 2 decades of educating, I've managed to allow for grace and space for people to ask questions, to become educated. And again, I think through my presence at the Capitol, I've been able to diversify that diversity, to simply dispel those myths through those relationships. It is unfortunate that people will use my advocacy record as a means to tear down this historical moment in Colorado history. They find it threatening that I am the spokeswoman for the largest mosque in the Rocky Mountain region. They find it threatening that I do identify as a Palestinian American. They do find it threatening that I am a practicing Muslim. And they do find it threatening that I advocate for human rights, regardless of your community. And I think when people see me through my identity and through that lens, they start to pigeonhole me. And I do respect people like Ilhan and Rashida who do take it with such grace. And when I started this journey, I had that conversation with my campaign manager and my husband and my family, that these attacks will happen and it is inevitable. And it's unfortunate that that's my reality. But now it's our moment as a community to say, how do we want to reshape that conversation? How do we want to reshape that narrative and take back our community and not allow these folks who feel threatened to shape that conversation and to say, this is who we want to represent us. And, winning at county assembly here in Colorado allowed me to be the only candidate in the Democratic Party in the primary, I think was indicative of that conversation and that sea change happening.
Beautifully said. Wow, well said. Thank you for answering that. That is not an easy, I can't imagine being on the receiving end of that, and it's never ending, right? It seems, but I appreciate your speaking on that powerfully. So the incumbent in the seat, Jovan Melton, has endorsed you.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've had conversations with him. Has he indicated what the biggest challenges have been for him, and what are they, and how will you approach them?
Yeah, and we're actually continuing that conversation today, actually, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think I've kind of touched on this since we started today, and I think, a lot of the issues that Coloradans face, regardless of your House district or your Senate district or wherever you live, really, we have these shared issues, but we also have these shared values. And this is what we want to come together on. Again, the rising costs of living here in Colorado is astronomical. We have older people who are finding themselves, at one point saying, I have crossed my T's, dotted my I's, planned for retirement. I have savings. I bought my home, and now I can enjoy retirement. Now that narrative has changed, and they're forced to apply for part-time jobs to make ends meet. People are having to choose between, do I pay rent or ration my insulin? Our young folks are now having to ask that question, can I afford a post-high school career in higher education? How do we lift up the ability that jobs and education, that civil rights, that affordable housing, quality healthcare, sustainable climate solutions, that children do not belong in cages and Black Lives Matter are all basic human rights and not luxuries afforded to you based on the color of your skin, your religion, your zip code, or residency status. These issues are not exclusive to HD 41. They're very prevalent here in HD 41. And these are the ones that my lived experiences have made a priority in my platform. And so, again, while they are still hot button issues, having, again, a lived experience in every single one of these topics will make them a priority for me. I have a pre-existing condition. I watched Dad die of cancer over 6 years. And in his last year of life, we received a summary of care bill for $1 million.
Wow.
If it wasn't for ACA and assistance, we would have been bankrupt. But that is the narrative for many Americans and many people living here. And so we need to start changing that. And we need to start making, we need to start tackling these issues to make that American dream a reality.
Yeah. Well said. And those universal needs disproportionately affect, lower poor, lower working class, which again is disproportionately people of color, right? So those universal programs, UBI, I'm not sure if you're an advocate for that, but UBI and universal health care, that gives a safety net. And
Yeah.
since they're disproportionately disaffected by the current system, they would be, they would receive extra benefits, right? The playing field becomes a bit more level, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's kind of on our ballot this year in Colorado, right? Fighting the 22-week abortion ban. This often does face and affect BIPOC communities and communities that are lower socioeconomic in communities. And so when you don't have access to reproductive health, to women's care, this is when this becomes an issue. No pregnancy is a monolith. No woman is a monolith. And by legislating this, it takes away her ability to take care of her mental, emotional, and physical care. And the same thing with paid family leave this year on our ballot. Oftentimes, it is folks from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that do not have the ability to take off time from work, to afford childcare, or to have in-home care for that person who needs it. And again, watching Dad go through this and being his caretaker, I have that lived experience where you need to fight for these basic rights for the people of Colorado.
Yeah. And especially during the pandemic, can you talk about, how that's affected your district, how the response has been, and how could it be better if you were in office?
I think I say this and I don't mean it in a cliche kind of way, but we are all in this together. I wear a mask so I can protect my neighbor. I can protect my mother who's over 65. I can protect the people in my community. HD 41 does have a good concentration of older people, and I want to make sure that they are safe, so that when we can congregate again, I saw this meme on Facebook, but when we can congregate again, no one is missing.
Yeah.
And that's important to me, so that they can engage civically, so that they can come to me and say, I want to sit around your table to help you with policy because I am a constituent and this policy does affect my daily life. I'm in conversation with Superintendent Siegfried and Superintendent Munn from Aurora Public Schools and Cherry Creek Public Schools. And Superintendent Munn said it best, and he said, right now we are on Plan B. And this was back in August. And by December, we're going to be on Plan W.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me because I think that is true across the board, whether it's a place of worship or whether it's a restaurant or a small business or whether it is, Costco, for God's sakes, right here in my district. And so, all of these steps, all of these precautions that we need to be taking, especially going into cold and flu season, knowing that our children, for many, are back in school in person, increases that exposure rate, increases that risk. But I have to hand it to, our county commissioners, in the tri-county area, that are taking the necessary steps that sometimes aren't as popular among constituents, but again, are doing it in the best interest of our state.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong in evolving your tactics with new information, right? We live in an era where, politically so many gotchas, oh, you said this yesterday, but now you're this today, and therefore that's a negative. No, we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to improve and get better. And this, where else could that benefit more than the front line, the safe school return, right?
On so many fronts, on a policy level, every meeting I take, I tell people, I may not be an expert on this particular subject, but this is where I lean on you. I want to be the most educated I can be on this issue. So when I'm drafting or voting on policy, I have all of the information necessary to make a sound decision. And I think this goes across all, on all fronts, especially in the time of COVID.
Yeah. Since we're talking about education a little bit, or schools,
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your platform to improve public education, teacher salary. How do you stand on teacher unions and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of our teachers union, of public education. I'm the product of public schools. And in Colorado, we have something called Tabor, which hamstrings a lot of our budget, and it affects a lot, most times, our public schools. And so, this year on our ballot is to repeal Gallagher, which goes hand in hand with Tabor. And so that is a first step to start chipping away at something that has really been a chokehold on public funding for public education. I think, again, as an educator myself, as the daughter of an educator, I think our teachers are some of our most unsung heroes. These are the folks that are not only handling mental health issues, but they are handling, private issues at home with our students. They are giving one-on-one time with students. They are making sure that our students go across that commencement line. And, I watch my own nephews and niece do remote learning. And someone asked me, do you think here in Colorado, we have a per pupil allowance for schools? And the question was, do you think that people who choose to homeschool or do remote learning during COVID, that per pupil allowance should be returned? And I thought to myself, our teachers are doing more than ever right now to make sure that our children are being educated with the quality education that we need to craft global citizens on a global scale and be competitive in a global market. And so, for me, I feel like right now, more than ever, we need to be raising up our teachers. We need to be raising up their support systems. Yesterday I rose up one of my own constituents who is a school nurse. And, she was telling me school nurses are still very much working right now remote. And for them, that has shifted to doing home visits, helping people who have had their insurance taken away, get assistance, do home food delivery, help with mental health care, even deliver laptops to students who don't have the resources or cannot afford one. These are the people that we need to be supporting right now in the time of COVID, because they are taking care of our most vulnerable people in our state, and those are our children.
Yeah, here, here. And let's tie that in back to the Moms Demand Action common sense gun reform efforts on violent prevention. Active shooter drills. I mean, we haven't had mass shootings in schools because kids haven't been in schools. But as an educator and having close ties with educators, I'm sure you've heard firsthand stories of what those active shooter drills look like, feel like, how they traumatize the kids. Talk about what we could possibly do on that front.
I've had these conversations quite a bit. And, before COVID, I was on a listening tour for, not only constituents, but people who are stakeholders. And I took my time with the education community and teachers, especially, to hear about these experiences. And, I think everyone has a different idea about how we can make our schools safer. That said, I distinctly remember I was a sophomore at Overland High School when Columbine happened. And all of a sudden, we were going through something called a lockdown.
Yeah.
I had never experienced that. And now it's become normalized.
Yeah.
And that is not normal. Our children, even as humans, we should not be normalizing gun violence on any front. When I go to a movie theater, I don't want to have to look for the exit because of a threat, right? Maybe in case of a fire, sure, but not in case of gun violence. And what gun safety looks like, and how we can prevent mass shootings, especially in our schools, is going to be something that I want to make sure we have teachers engaged in, because they are the people that are going to be on the front lines protecting those students. And I can think of countless examples of teachers around the nation who have lost their lives or were injured doing that exact same thing.
Yeah.
So, and I know that there are safety protocols in place now, signing in guests, making sure that teachers have identification and lanyards. Even students are having those identifications that they have to carry at all times. Increased security at schools. Does it make sense to have police at schools? Does that change the dynamic and the relationship between the community and police? And so, again, these are all very valid questions that we need to start addressing, especially if we start going back in person.
Yeah. Yeah. The fear with police in schools is if you carry a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So, that adds fuel to the fire, just like, we were talking about holding police accountable and so forth.
Right.
In general, I'm not sure that's a path we need to take further steps down, right? Before we go, again, it's imanforcolorado.com, November 3rd. She needs your vote. She needs your donations. You can volunteer. It's hopefully it's a safe blue district, but she does have a Republican challenger. I didn't look him up, but I'm going to assume he's a run-of-the-mill terrible Republican, and you shouldn't vote for him. And Iman is awesome.
Thank you.
We'd be blessed to have her fighting the fight on the Colorado floor of the House.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, because you have a bit of a unique perspective on it, and I don't want to belabor anything sort of identity related, but
Sure.
coming from a Palestinian heritage, what do we as a country get wrong about that? Like, we're so obviously there's AIPAC, there's the right-wing government of Israel that people are bribed to support by default, and if you say anything critical of Israel, then you're anti-Semitic and blah. The whole landscape, and I don't have to explain it to you.
Yeah.
What as an educator, you've done this for decades. What do we get wrong about that as a country, and how can we overcome that?
It's a great question, and first, let me say, going into the Colorado State House, I obviously won't be doing foreign policy, but as an educator, I think, have inherited this conflict. I've realized that one of the best things is, in fact, education. And so centering my own nonprofit around education was my goal. I've taken hundreds of Americans to the Middle East for educational immersion trips to just provide them with an unobstructed platform that immerses them in the different narratives, right? Whether it's a Israeli settler living in the West Bank, or a Palestinian Bedouin, or two parents, a Palestinian and Israeli, who have both lost children to the conflict. And so for me, it's about giving a balanced perspective that doesn't have an asymmetrical slant that is only providing one view of the conflict. This is a very complex issue. It's something that I teach at the University of Denver over weeks. And people write their dissertation on this subject. So, if I were to ask anyone anything, is that if you have a responsibility to use your privilege, whether that is as an American, as a voter, as an advocate, is to use whatever privilege or platform you have to educate yourself to the best of your ability, so that you can be the most informed when it comes to this very complex issue. Reach out to a Palestinian, ask those tough questions, because I guarantee you, as I always say in class, I would much rather have you ask what you think is a stupid question than go on believing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Right. And Palestinian rights are human rights.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those AIPAC trips, I think, are asymmetrical, not to get into that too much, but, yeah, thanks for answering that. Anything else that we didn't hit on policy wise that you want to promote? I mean, I think we covered a lot. Anything?
Yeah, I honestly I want to say, I think it's important that we are electing people who are true breath and reflection of our community. And that means up and down the ballot. We have the chance to make history here in Colorado in HD 41, but that is very true around the nation on a myriad of campaigns. And so let's keep that in mind. Let's vote on our shared values, on our love for democracy, and that we want to push that progressive needle towards positive policy. And I encourage voters to look at those track records. I myself have, you pulled up my record, and making sure that there is that diversity in that track record is important for that representation, so that we can say we have confidence in our representation.
Right on. Well, Godspeed. November 3rd is election. imanforcolorado.com. Iman Jodeh. Thank you for taking some time to chat with me. And, not to get ahead of myself, I can't wait to see where you go. I think you're just an absolute superstar. And thank you for all your work here heretofore. Thank you for running. I can't wait to see what you accomplish and where you go.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to close on an ad which kind of includes an endorsement from the incumbent. So thank you for taking some time. Oh, you know what? Actually, one more question before I go. Anyone else on your slate or in your area, in your district, that you want to make mention of?
That's a candidate?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. I think our incoming class of legislators is really cool, but we also have some local races that are super important. Lisa Neal Graves is running for county commissioner in Douglas County. If she wins, she will be the first African American woman to hold this seat. And in conjunction with her, Darian is also running in Douglas County for county commissioner. We have David Ortiz, who's running. He is a combat vet, and he is unfortunately paralyzed. So he will also be making history in the state house. Some of our incumbents as well. Brianna Titone is the first trans woman to hold office here and has a competitive seat. We are raising up soon-to-be Senator James Coleman, who is an amazing collaborator and an ally of mine and good friend. So, I think Colorado, in my mind, is incredibly blessed this year to have such amazing candidates. Thank you for asking that question.
Amazing. Yeah, yourself included. So vote for Iman on November 3rd. Thank you for running. I hope to speak to you again and call you Representative Jodeh at some point. And
thank you.
Yeah, good luck on November 3rd. I'm going to close that with this ad. Thank you.
Thank you, friends.
The problems we're facing today are greater than they were just 3 months ago.
Housing, healthcare, jobs, and education all had challenges before that have all been redefined.
But as our problems are greater, we must be greater.
I know we will rise to the challenge.
It will take courage and fortitude to make the changes necessary to build our state in this new reality.
We don't know what the future holds and what will be needed from our government.
But we know that we will have to keep looking out for each other.
Our next state representative will be responsible for crafting legislation that will pull Colorado back together after this pandemic.
We will need someone experienced in handling a crisis, someone skilled at advocating for all people, and someone with a proven track record of leading and building community.
Iman Jodeh is the person we can rely on for this crisis. She is a person of integrity who knows how to bring people together. In a time when hate crimes have doubled, Iman has represented the largest mosque in the Rocky Mountain region, leading with a calm, strong voice, tender compassion, and resolve toward action. As our state representative, Iman will lead with that same calm strength. She will support families impacted by our current crisis and work hard to pass legislation that will correct the course for our state.
The challenges we are facing are complex and high stakes. We need Iman Jodeh as our next state representative. Iman has spent much of the past few years fighting for people at the Capitol, advocating for Aurora families, and pushing legislators to see the impacts of policies on those that they could otherwise ignore. Iman has demonstrated skill in navigating the challenging dynamics of the legislature and has already done the work of improving how our state serves its people.
I'm Iman Jodeh, a born and raised Coloradan from right here in Aurora, a first-generation American, a progressive Democrat, community advocate and educator, and I'm running to be the next state representative of HD 41. I will fight for you every day at the Capitol and in community. I will work to correct the dangerous flaws in our healthcare system. I will work to support small businesses and working people who've had their livelihoods ripped away from them. I will make sure that our educational system effectively prepares our students and properly compensates our educators. And I will be present and engaged with you as I work with you to find solutions so that you have the chance to realize your dreams. I will not give up hope on the American dream. Moving forward, our lives may look different than we imagined, but I will not walk away from my belief that everyone deserves a shot at realizing the American dream. As your state representative, I will fight for you and guide our state as we navigate and rebuild from the impacts of the crisis we are facing. I'm Iman Jodeh, and I would appreciate your vote to be the next state representative of HD 41.